We are going to start the part 3 of the Trading Analytics project solution by generating our column, our calculated fields, which are returns and cumulative returns column. In order to do so, we are going to follow the formula which is detailed below. Top. We are going to start the part 3 of the project. Top. We are going to start the part 3 of the Trading Analytics project solution part by generating our calculated field, which are returns and cumulative return column. In order to do so, we are going to follow step by step the details of the formula details just below, just here. So let's start by the daily percentage return. The daily percentage return equal to 1 plus the closing price dot percentage change with 1 day inside as argument. Okay, we have the first example with Uber data. What we are going to do here, we are going to do exactly the same, but just change the name of the data frame. We are going to use Twitter data. And as well as for Netflix and Snap. Once you have done that, you have generated the first column, which is the return column. This return column is gonna give you the percentage that you are making on a daily basis. For instance, if you look at the first value, between the 2nd January and the 3rd of January, on Netflix, you have made 1.9% returns on your investment, etc., etc. Let's go with data head 10, for instance. If you can see here, between the 8th and 9th January 2018, you lost 1.2% of your value. That's why you are calculating the daily returns, because speaking in terms of visual speaking, that have more matter than just having the share price. Mainly when the share price are on different scale. Okay, right now just created your first calculated field. Now what we are going to do now, after that, is creating the cumulative return column. It's this one. The cumulative return column gonna give you, on the long-term basis, you're gonna make the addition of the different returns that you got in order to calculate how much percent did you reach after 1 year, 2 years, etc. Okay. In order to do so, we are going similarly to follow the calculation field, which is 1 plus the percentage daily return dot comprod. These two functions are already included in Python. You just have to execute and got the value. Let's do it. Up 1 plus Twitter data column return of this data frame dot comprod. We have to do similarly for the other one. As you can see, that's as easy as this one. 1 plus data frame name, the percentage daily return column name. Let's say if this column, if we name this column something like percentage daily return, you just have to type percentage daily return. Here we name it returns, which means that you have to call the return column. Once you reach this point, you have just to execute and check out if you find out the same result as follow. You must have as the first value of each column non-attributed value, NaN, for return and cumulative return, because you are doing the percentage, you are doing the difference between this value minus this value, which means that you can't make a difference with a value which doesn't exist. That's why you get a non-attributed value. You can replace this value by 0 and this one by 1 if you want. That's not necessary, but you can do that. Once you check the head, you have to check the tails and check that the tails is complete, that you don't have non-attributed value. In order to do so, that's similar to Netflix data head. What you are going to do here, you want to check it for Uber data. You have to type Uber data head. So instead of head, you want the tail, and execute. Oh, sorry, it's tails. Yeah, don't forget that Python is case sensitive. Yeah, now we must be good. Okay, let's set up for 5 value, and okay, and we got the same table. Congratulations, you just created the 2 calculated fields, which are gonna be used for plotting the different graphs. To make a quick recap, as you can see, if you want to get your daily return, you have just to use the percentage change function, and if you want to have your cumulative return, you have to use Camprod. The other way to calculate this field would be to use this formula, which means like closing price divided by closing price dot shift 1 minus 1, which means that you essentially, when you're doing that, you're just making the difference from day 1 to day 2. Okay. So right now we are going in the second part of this video number 3. We are going to plot these new columns into 3 different graphs. The first one will be cumulative returns. Second one, a volume analysis with the share price, and the last one will be a volatility analysis. For the volatility analysis, you are going to use return column, and for the first graph, which is cumulative returns, you are going to use a cumulative return column. One way to do it is either you can directly call this column inside your graph, or you can insert this column inside the variable. And what I recommend you for more readability is to insert this column into a variable. For instance, the column return for Twitter, you are going to call the variable Twitter returns and Twitter cumulative returns. Once we are done, we are going to start with the first step of the plotting part. The first one is to plot the cumulative returns in order to compare this graph with what happens right here. Here we have the evolution of the stock price. We have said that is not relevant. And here what we are going to do is to plot, instead of plotting the share price, we are going to plot the cumulative return that you are going to make with these shares, in order to find out what is most interesting to invest in. Okay, in order to do so, as usual, we are going to set up figure equal code.figure. It's our entry, and in order to show, and in order to show, we are going to finish our query by asking plotly to show. And in between, we are going to start by adding the traces, which means here we have 4 different traces to add. We have to add Twitter. We have to add on x-axis. The x-axis will be the same. Yeah, small mistake here. Here that will be that will be the snap. I'm going to substitute that and correct it. Yeah, here that will be Twitter data index, TWTR data index. Here that will be Netflix data index, and here Snap data index. On the y-axis, that will represent the Twitter, Netflix, Snap, and Uber cumulative returns, as you can see here. And in order to have the name on the right side, we are going to define name equal, and that will generate automatically this information on the right side. Once you added your trust, you will have, if you execute this one, you will have just this trust and this information on the right side. You will not have a range slider here, and you will have neither the cumulative returns and date information on the y and x axis. That's why here what we are going to do, we are going to update x and y axis by this way. Up. Let's plot it, and yeah, and if you execute that, you will find out you will have the same result. You will have the details of how much money you must have made if you invest in Uber, Snapchat, Twitter, or Netflix. As you can see here, if you invest on Uber, that you must have lost money over the time. DeepSight, since the coronavirus beginning of the crisis, Uber is doing great, but the main shares which taking the most advantage of the coronavirus are Snapchat and Netflix. You can see that visually. If you go on Netflix, you can see that you would have made around 75% profit in terms of return since the beginning of since the lowest price after the coronavirus crisis. And for Snapchat, that's a result which is kind of similar, whilst Uber and Twitter are just going up very slowly. And if you look at Snapchat, that was making you lose more money than Twitter before the coronavirus, and since the COVID-19 crisis, now they are like fighting to be in terms of return on investment. Okay, once you plot this first graph, we are going to plot the second graph, which is a little bit more technical. In this graph, we are going to compare the volume and the share price to check the impacts that the volume traded has on the performance of the shares. Okay, in order to do so, similarly to what we have done here, we are going to start by declaring the figure. Control V. And at the end, you will have to show the figure. And here in this graph is a mix between a scatter plot and a histogram. That's why and a bar chart or a histogram. That's why we are going to add two traces. The first one is a scatter plot, and the second one is a bar chart on which we divide the volume price by 20 million. You can divide it by 40 million, by 200 million. If you divide it, for instance, by 200 million, the result will be included between 0 and 1. If you want to have a bigger scale, you can do as well. But yeah, in this case particularly, we divided by 20 million. Okay, and we are going to update the X and Y axis similarly to get the data here on the X and Y axis, plus adding a run slider. And similarly to what we have done, we are going to do that. Similarly, fig update x-axis, title dates, run slider equal true, fig update y-axis, title equal ranks price in USD, and you get your x and y axis. Yeah, that's all for the part 3. And right now at the end of the part 3, I give you a small challenge that you will have to solve. This challenge is, first of all, after answering the question, if you find out any correlation between the volume and the price. As you can see, it's quite obvious that the share price evolution or the volatility gonna depend of the volume traded, which means for instance, if you want to make a lot of money faster, you must choose some company on which the volume traded is high, because you will have big impact, a massive impact on your share price evolution. If you see, if you check out, for instance, on the February 7, we had 11.6 times 20 millions, which means 23.2 million. 230 million USD which have been traded on Snapchat. And if you look at the news, you will find out that Snapchat raised good news this day, and that's why the volume trade have been so high. Okay, yeah, and yeah, as you can see, I believe that everyone can notice a massive correlation between the volume traded and the share price. Again, here, one of the major loss for Snapchat occurs on the 1st of May, and this day represents one of the massive days in terms of volume traded for the shares. So the answer must be, it's not a closed answer, that can be quite open, and yeah, but you can find out different correlation, visual correlation between the volume traded and the share price. And to conclude this video, we are going just to go over the extra task that I gave you, which was to compare the volatility for Netflix and Uber visually by creating a plot. I never went through Plotly Figure Factory, but that's gonna depend about some independent research that you're gonna have to do. In order to do so, that's quite easy. I give you the name of the application, which is Plotly Figure Factory. What you have to do, just go on Google and type Plotly Figure Factory histogram sample, and you will get, just click on the first link. Yeah, and you will get different example of what you can do with Plotly Figure Factory. For instance, we can use this one, something similar to this one, and if you look at the structure, we have first of all add histogram data, group data together, and then create a disk plot. Here I gave you which histogram data we want to add. It's Netflix return, and I added a field NA because if you look at the data sets, if you look at the first value, that's the NA value. That's why I added fill NA in order to fill it by a value of 0. If you want to fill NA by 1, you can just type .fill NA 1. That's gonna change all the NA value by 1. That's the histogram data. The second part is setting this data into a variable that you are going to call isData, and as well as if you want your group label, you can set it in a second variable that you are going to call group label in order to have it here in the right side. That's what we are going to do here. We are going to set up our histogram data by x1 and x2, and our group labels by Netflix and Uber, because X1 represents Netflix and X2 represents Uber. Once you have achieved that, we are going to create a displot with custom bin size. It's what they not signify here. Up, copy, paste, and the only difference gonna be on the bin size. As I told you, I want 1%, a bin size of 1%. And if you execute, you will find out this result, this table. And when you look at this graph, the first thing that you can see is the fact that Uber is much more volatile than Netflix, which means if you want to trade with safety, you must trade with Netflix. Otherwise, if you want to be more aggressive in your trading, Uber can be a good solution. Second point that you can see here, you can see that Uber is more skewed to the left, which means on average Uber will make less money and will be more risky, whilst Netflix is more skewed to the right. It's not very obvious like that. I believe if you take a smaller bin size, you can even see it better. But yeah, if you look at it right here, you can see that there is a small difference. There is a small difference in terms of average, but that makes sense because if you look at this graph, you can see that Netflix brings much more money than Uber. That's why that Netflix is more skewed to the right than Uber. But in terms of volatility, Uber is much more risky company. You can also find out some outliers. For Uber, for instance, you got an outlier of one day, which this company lost 21.3%. And one day where Uber got 38%. Okay, that's all for this solution part 3. And see you in the next step where we are going to implement some algorithm. That will be the first introduction of algorithm for our trading analytics project. See you!